Thanks, Joe. For example, this is another of those wonderful lighthouses. This will be the last one, I promise. Here we are at Low Isles, which is a reef complex near Port Douglas, fairly far north. Well, not as north as the reef goes, but this was the northernmost of this series of timber and iron lights, and it's still in use as a lighthouse, and it's the ground it sits on is part of the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park Authority estate. I'll do as they do and call them the Gabrumpa. So the Gabrumpa is the kind of landlord, and the lighthouse tower, just a small area of land to contain that, is leased to AMSA, the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, another Commonwealth agency that operates the lighthouse, which is now completely automatic. There are no manned or staffed lighthouses anywhere in Australia. But there used to be staff, and they lived in houses like this. Low Isles had 3 lightkeepers, and each lightkeeper had a wife, and each couple had children, and they had school there at the island and operated in a kind of social microcosm. And here we are in 1908, and the staff of the light station are enjoying a Christmas celebration. I can almost hear the gramophone going and this hearty singing joining in. It's great to see the sort of social standards kept up. I love the tablecloth with the crocheted edge and lovely dresses. And their kind of idyllic seclusion was kind of disrupted in 1928, 1929, when a very important scientific expedition came and set up a base on Low Isles and spent the year making what I understand is the first systematic study of the natural history of the reef. So there were several dozen scientists, some Australian, most British, from Oxford, I think, and they studied geomorphology, they probed the fish and they probed the coral, and they did all sorts of research that hadn't been done before, and had a terrific time. And the leader of that expedition, a man called Young, produced this book in 1930, A Year on the Great Barrier Reef. And this was, I think, probably a popular success. I had no trouble buying a copy of this. There are plenty of them still out there. For a book from, a non-fiction book from 1930, to be able to go out and just buy a copy, that says to me that it had a big circulation. It certainly, from reading other material from other sources, is pretty plain that it had a lot of effect, and there was a huge interest in what was revealed about the functioning of the reef that wasn't understood before, how coral propagated, all sorts of things that are outside of my ken, but in summary very influential. They were based at Low Isles, but they made trips. They had this research vessel. They sent parties off further north and further south. Of Low Isles, they produced this wonderful map. The lighthouse sits on this sand cay here. It's the only kind of more or less solid part of the reef. The rest is kind of in the littoral zone, I guess you'd say. Now back to the Gabrumpa and what's happened to Low Isles. I've been there a couple of times, strictly to look at the lighthouse, of course, not for any other purpose, and I was able to observe what happened and what happens. The main industry here is tourism. This is a no-take zone, so it's not even possible to do that kind of scientific research of taking samples there, so that the University of Queensland study facility that used to be there until a few years ago was closed down because they couldn't take specimens, and so they needed to go somewhere else. So what we see here is a tourism operation that's all a highly efficient machine for processing tourists through a sort of experience of the reef, the glass-bottomed boats, the lavish lunch, the scuba diving, and so forth, all quite strictly supervised and licensed by the Gabrumpa. What would I know? But it does appear to me to be one of the things that agency is doing pretty well. And because I've had Gabrumpa as a client on these conservation studies, I'm aware of the kind of tensions there are in managing these sites. So there's a lot of pressure from the tourism operators to allow things to happen, and a lot of pretty effective resistance from the Gabrumpa people when it's threatening. And I think that's your cue, Joe.